This is the Bandwagon, powered by Ram Trucks, podcast about baseball and ghosts. Usually I come up with like a less on-the-nose bit, but I don't know. We're talking about ghosts, apparently. We'll get to that. I'm Hannah Kaiser, baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Okay, I should say hello. Hi, Zach.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine. You know who's not fine? There we go. Now we got to it.
Jacob DeGrom is not fine.
This happened right after we recorded last week. Like close enough to our recording that we were like, do we have to add an addendum to our podcast? Even though we didn't specifically talk about Jacob DeGrom, we did mention the Rangers. Weirdly, their success was not at the time dependent on Jacob DeGrom because he was already out on the injured list, and now he will be out on the injured list for a long time.
Yes, he is having I think he had Tommy John surgery yesterday morning.
They're not calling it.
They're not calling it Tommy John surgery. He had a surgery on his elbow to repair a torn UCL, so it's possible that he had the internal brace surgery. We don't really, I guess, technically know which surgery he had, but either way, he is probably going to be out for roughly a year, maybe more, and that's not the way that the Rangers wanted this to go when they signed him to a very large contract.
I will say I actually don't have like a great sense of why they're being cagey or coy about what they call the surgery. I understood it initially, but now that the surgery has happened, like I understand that actually when you injure your elbow, your UCL or whatever, teams do sometimes like to be like, we don't totally know the extent of the damage until we get in there. When we take a look inside, we'll know what we need to do. But yeah, the surgery has taken place. Rangers manager Bruce Bochy said the procedure went well. I don't know why they're not naming it. Superstition, maybe it's a ghost thing. We'll get to that.
They're actually waiting till we record this podcast, and then moments after that, they will explain exactly how the surgery went.
They'll be like, surprisingly, it's only going to take a month. No, he's probably going to be out for it the rest of the year and maybe all of next year too. This is relatively old news. It happened last week. But is there anything about this that you want to talk about?
No, it's just kind of bleak. I mean, you wrote a good column about how Jacob DeGrom is more than a parable, and he is, but he is also sort of an example of the difficulty of having nice things in pitching, which is he pushed his body to the limit more successfully than any other starting pitcher probably ever. Certainly in the short-term highs category, more than the durability category. He pushed his body to the limits, and it broke. We got a few seasons of almost just unfathomable greatness where he was running ERAs under 2. He was striking out more batters than anyone's ever struck out as a starter before. We don't have a great idea of what causes pitching injuries, but one of the few things we're pretty sure it does is velocity and throwing at your peak velocity over and over again. And, DeGrom was throwing 101, 102 mile per hour fastballs somewhat regularly, along with 93 mile per hour sliders, which, that was a really fast fastball 15 years ago. So it's a kind of a risk of having amazing pitching is sometimes we're going to have amazing pitching that is taken away from us by injury.
I think there's a lot of different ways that DeGrom and now his injury is like an interesting jumping off point for like much bigger topics that we don't necessarily have time to get into. For instance, the question of whether or not, I know people have tried to write about this, but I don't think, and if someone's done so more recently in a more satisfying way, please tell me about it in the Twitter or something. I know people have tried to write about like this concept of like just take a little off. I think we often, maybe not often, but with certain pitchers, we talk about like they're so effective at X speed. Why don't they just trade a little speed for a little durability? Like as if it's like a perfect sort of axis and they have the ability to calibrate it in that way. And maybe they do, but I don't know that they do. And I think that's a really actually genuinely interesting question that a lot of like the sort of inflection point that we're at with baseball in some ways hinges on like the pitch clock and the potential like decreasing limits on pitching staffs. Like all of that is in some ways built around this idea that if forced to be more durable, whether that's like throw deeper into games or just, try not to have a second elbow UCL surgery in your career, that pitchers could just be like ever so slightly less effective, and that will correspond to a knowable level of increased durability. And I don't know that we have like a accurate sense of what that scale is, or even an understanding of like guys' willingness to do that. Like, I think I've talked about this a lot, that like I think it's really interesting that like a lot of what MLB is trying to do at a league level is like convince pitchers to be less good at their jobs so that the game is more interesting. But pitchers don't want to be less good at their jobs because it's their job to be really good at their jobs. DeGrom is an example of that exists in some ways like outside this ecosystem of just like what MLB is trying to do, because he was like an outlier already. Other thing about this that I think is interesting, and I could wait a couple years to talk about this, so I'm just going to touch on it now. I've seen more than one column write-up in the wake of this. Tom Verducci at Sports Illustrated is the one that I read this morning, that included some version of the line, whatever thin chances he had of making the Hall of Fame are all but gone. And we don't need to spend too much time on this, but I would just like to say, you can vote him into the Hall of Fame if you want. Like, this is my like Hall of Fame take, which is that like, what if it wasn't that we tried to take who was already in the Hall of Fame and retrofit a set of criteria to it for which you then had to fall within that criteria in order to gain induction from now going forward? What if we were just like, I don't know, seems like Jacob DeGrom was pretty famous, standout, exemplar, outlier, most interesting pitcher in baseball for some amount of time, and we think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. That's all. Right. You can vote for him if you want.
Yeah, I think there's a case that he's sort of the, we talk all the time about there's no more 300-game winners. It's the workloads have winnowed down, and I'd be interested to see if you kind of scale the innings and the wins and all of those types of things, how close he comes to the Sandy Koufax model of brief, brilliant peak and then a drop-off because of health. So, yeah. And
would you vote for him?
I don't
sorry,
know.
I'm putting you on the spot. I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't have a vote, and B, my inclination is yes, but I'd have to look more at it. I think the late bloomer guys who have those huge, dramatic peaks are really kind of a tough case, but I think more of them deserve entry than get it. That's for sure.
Right. My point is just like, this is why we have voting and not an algorithm, so that people can say like, wow, this guy had a really massive, indelible impact on the way we understood the game for a certain amount of time. Unfortunately, he has to be lost to the annals of history because he didn't pitch for long. Like, you can just vote for him. Just vote for him. If you think Jacob DeGrom is very famous and very good, and that the tragedy of his career is in some way compelling and only adds to the mystique, vote for him for the Hall of Fame. That sounds like I'm like campaigning for him. I'm not. I'm just campaigning for people who think should be in the Hall of Fame, to vote for him in the Hall of Fame, even though he might not pitch again, or at least not as effectively. Okay. Jacob DeGrom's former team
with two guys who won't have trouble getting into the Hall of Fame.
Exactly. There we go. Two pitchers who will get into the Hall of Fame, not just because of their peaks, but because of their longevity. Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, but not based on what they're doing this year.
The New York Mets are having a bad time. They had a brief moment of, they're coming out of it, they're going to compete, and then they have lost 8 of their last 9 games. They got swept at home by the Blue Jays. Then they had just another series from hell in Atlanta where they lost all 3 games despite leading all 3 games by 4 runs or more. Then they lost 2 of 3 to the Pirates. I mean, just Pete Alonso got hurt in Atlanta. He's out and on the IL with a wrist injury. It's not broken, but it's apparently bruised and sprained. I'm not sure how that happens, but it did. That's the landscape as the Mets come back home tonight, Tuesday night, to play the Yankees in the first iteration of the Subway Series. Everyone's anxious, but the Mets especially are just seemingly at a tipping point with their season where this could go totally off the rails.
The Mets seem like a team that's like, like so often what people want you to do as like a person who covers a sport is explain why someone or some team is good or why someone or some team is bad. And the sort of soft answers are really dissatisfying, but the Mets feel like they actually fall into the category of like, yikes, how bad they've been probably makes it hard to be good now, because it seems kind of like a bummer to be the New York Mets right now. That said, I am totally cribbing this from Tim Britton at The Athletic. And also it's a day old because I cribbed it yesterday for my appearance on on MLB Network. And so we're talking about June 12th stats. Tim Britton pointed out that the last 4 full seasons, so excluding 2020, pennant winners in the NL, so the team that played in the World Series, were all outside the playoff picture on June 12th. Last year, the Phillies, 2021, the Braves, 2019, the Nationals, 2018, the Dodgers. So they don't necessarily need an overhaul, especially if it is difficult to diagnose what's wrong other than people aren't playing super well. Like, they're in a malaise. They look kind of disillusioned. And also everyone is massively underperforming. Like, virtually every member of the offense except Francisco Alvarez and Tommy Pham is playing like far below their projected WRC plus projection, like preseason projections from Fangraphs. So yeah, everyone's just underperforming, but some recent history would advise you to just wait it out.
Right. The trouble for the Mets is, A, that they have competition in that category of outside the playoff picture, both the Phillies, the Padres. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could apply to other than them. But I think the big thing with the Mets is, yes, they have almost their entire team underperforming, but they are not a team where it's like, oh, well, let's use the Braves as an example. Sorry, Mets fans. They are not a team with a bunch of like 26-year-olds having a slow start who are going to kick it into gear. They are old. There are no pitchers in their organization under the age of 36 who have any track record of being good at all. So if you are waiting for a team to bounce back, that's to bounce back to its previous track record. That's usually not a bad bet. It's a worse bet when you're waiting on guys who are over the age of 36 to bounce back, because that is usually just aging. And that does not tend to turn around. Even as great as Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer are, I don't know that I would put all of my money on them returning to prior form, because that was already a weird, unbelievable quirk of their greatness. And Scherzer actually has not been bad. His ERA is above average. He's just kind of been inconsistent and has, 4 good innings and then loses it in the 5th or something like that. Verlander, almost just a different side of the same issue, where he's great every other start and terrible every other start. They might put that all back together, but there's still not a lot of depth behind them to feel really confident that the Mets are going to have a huge surge in that department. So then you're looking for the offense to step back up and, kind of waiting on that to take over.
It certainly seems more likely that the offense will just kind of return to form, or that you could pick up some like interesting supplementary pieces at the deadline. The rotation is in a really rough spot because, there's like a lot. You could pick almost any category and like dig into how the Mets are. But like, from one perspective, they're because like, you're right. The Scherzer Verlander of it all was a gamble on them being able to maybe not coast, but kind of coast to the postseason. Like, we knew coming into this season that they were going to have to be really judicious with the way they allocated the innings for their older pitchers. Yeah, mostly just that. Like, and also not just the two of them, but Kodai Senga, who's entirely used to working on like 6 days or like a 6-day schedule, 6-man rotation type schedule. The hope was like, oh, well, there'll be wiggle room. Tyler McGill or David Peterson will be good enough that we can mix and match. We'll have this depth. Our offense is so good. Like, you know what I mean? The hope was that at this point in the season, it would not feel like, oh my God, we need Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer to 1, pitch every 5 days, 2, go deep into games, and 3, be at their like peak selves every time, because it's like our only chance to win games. And that's really what's putting them in a really tough position, is like the urgency that is being placed on those two bullets, which they were kind of hoping to not fire until the end of the season.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we will talk about the Mets a lot. Do you want to talk about Shohei Ohtani hitting 2 home runs?
I wanted to very briefly mention Shohei Ohtani before we move into a different set of physical outliers. Shohei Ohtani, I mean, he's always the biggest story in baseball. He's about to become an even bigger story in baseball because the Angels need to be thoroughly in contention to kind of convince themselves to keep him and build around him for the rest of the season, probably ahead of the trade deadline. And he's doing a lot to make that happen. Last night, they were facing the division-leading Rangers, one of the best teams in baseball, and they stepped up. Shohei Ohtani stepped up. He hit a game-tying home run that would have been a huge impressive highlight regardless of when it came in the game. I mean, he hit this thing a mile. Then he also hit a go-ahead home run in extra innings that turned out to be the winning runs. So he's doing his part to try to get the Angels into October, into playoff contention, and seeing him do that in a game that was clearly very meaningful, clearly had some stakes to it. It was a nice little, again, another taste of Shohei Ohtani on a big stage being something we would really benefit from seeing more of.
I also think I've lost sort of my ability to. It's interesting that now Shohei Ohtani only gets compared to Shohei Ohtani. Like that's sort like he's now both because he's got a little bit of track record here in Major League Baseball doing both, and because like even the Babe Ruth comparisons are kind of falling away as he does the two-way thing for longer. And so I just thought it was interesting, like over at The Athletic, they were sort of comparing his 2023 pace to his 2021, the AL MVP season pace. Looks pretty good. The only problem is that his like ERA is almost a full run higher than it was last season. They think perhaps, or maybe it's, I mean, they think he said through his interpreter, there are some times where I feel a little bit more fatigued. So there's been talk of them potentially also going back to a 6-man rotation. I say also because the Mets would like to be doing that. That's just to say that if you think that Shohei Ohtani has kind of like regressed back to human level while you weren't looking, he hasn't. So
he's especially been good with the bat, right? I think he ranks among the top 12 hitters in baseball right now, in addition to, pitching. So
Sarah Langs had a tweet that last year Ohtani was the first player ever to finish in the top 15 in Major League Baseball in both home runs hit and pitching strikeouts in a season. And he's currently in the top 3 for both of those categories. So again, it's like, if you feel like, oh, well, peak Ohtani is behind us, you're wrong. Let's get into a segment we're calling Built Different, powered by Ram Trucks. Sometimes you see a guy whose performance is game-changing and you think, wow, he's just built different. So Zach, I'm supposed to say, who amazed you this week? But I know who amazed you this week. So tell us all about Elly De La Cruz.
Yes, Elly De La Cruz is, maybe it's like he was built for this segment, because he is a 6'5" shortstop / third baseman / switch hitting total, like a transformer for baseball who's seemingly made of springs. He debuted for the Cincinnati Reds on June 6th. He was one of the top prospects in baseball. His rise from kind of curiosity because of his physical tools to, oh, yeah, no, this guy's an amazing player, has been very fast. And he torched AAA this year, showed impressive changes in plate discipline. All of this is to say, this is how he got to Cincinnati. And he is in Cincinnati now, and so far, it's been very exciting. He's hitting .296, slugging .519. He had a home run in his second game in the majors that hit the back wall of the stadium in Cincinnati. And then he also had a triple in that game. In another recent game, he scored a really crucial run by running from first to home on a double and running through the stop sign of his third base coach, and afterward proclaiming in English that he's the fastest man in the world, which, per StatCast, at least in the baseball world, is correct. So just an all-around, like, the sun arrived in Cincinnati after several years of darkness, and he is a skinny man named Elly De La Cruz.
There's 2 things that I really enjoy about Elly De La Cruz, and I've told you both of these already, so sorry for repeating. The people who listen to our podcast are not privy to every conversation we have about baseball all the time. The first is that it's really fun to see someone who's physical greatness lends itself to multiple different kinds of highlights, which is not to say that Aaron Judge is not super cool. I mean, actually, Aaron Judge does do multiple cool things. He both hits home runs and robs them. But like a lot of the really interesting, incredible, like game-changing players who have debuted in the past, I don't know, like 10 years have been game-changing because they hit home runs. When they do, or they throw really fast. That's the other thing. That's the other cool thing that people can do. They throw really fast or they hit the ball really far. Or they do both, like Shohei Ohtani. And Ellie De La Cruz is sort of like his aggressiveness on the base paths, his strength combined with his speed, combined with also just like the ability to hit the ball, means that we get a lot of different interesting things that we haven't ever seen before. He was on one of the plays that he scored on that he was very fast on. He like nearly lapped Jonathan India, who was running ahead of him. Like he scored like half a second behind him, even though he started on not the same base. And the other thing that I really enjoy is that he's been really good, like good in a holistic sense. I think there's the kind of like O'Neal Cruz experience of like the tools are really exciting and you see various like StatCast tweets come across your feed, but then you go and look at the Baseball Reference page or whatever and you're like, he hasn't quite put it together. And I know it's only been 7 games, but like Ellie De La Cruz is slashing 296, 406, 519. So he's also putting it together, making a difference. The Reds are interesting now. If you go and watch them, they might actually win. That's your guy. Can I talk about my guy?
You also have a guy. He's also very tall.
Yes. I was like, I got a tall guy too. How tall is Ellie De La Cruz?
He's 6'5" now, we think. He's grown 3 inches since he came into professional baseball, so his pages are a little off, but yeah.
Ha. Well, my guy's taller then. I wanted to talk about James Wood. I wrote about him last week, like a big, spend some time with a guy profile, because there's not a ton for Washington Nationals fans to get excited about. It's been a rough go for Washington Nationals fans, man. Like the pandemic happened, and so then they didn't get to do like a whole like victory lap. No one got to come to the games the year after they won the World Series. And I was like, that sucks for them. That's what a tiny little insignificant, relatively speaking, but also a bummer loss from the pandemic. And then in a baseball sense, things got worse from there for them. Like they missed the sort of like hooray, lovely rose-colored glasses season. And then by the time fans were allowed back in the ballpark, things were very bad. And one of the things that was been a bummer for the Nationals fans in these past couple of years is that in addition to trading virtually everybody else, they traded Juan Soto to the Padres. They got a bunch of people back. If that trade was worth it, if they're ever going to be good again in the near future, it'll be because those guys were all very promising, because that's what you get when you trade Juan Soto. And James Wood was one of them. He is a 6'6", bats left, throws right, center fielder, trying to stick in center field in the way that like tall guys don't always get to do. He's also very fast. He's really fun to watch run because he's like got these, like multiple people have written about him, including me, and all of us have pointed out that like he's just like really beautiful to watch run. He like looks like he's like floating and moving slowly, but he's actually moving fast. Even the Nationals like director of player development, Dijon Watson, has mentioned this, that he's like, it looks like he moves slow, but he's actually moving fast, which is just like a very aesthetically pleasing kind of style of baseball to play. He's extremely chill. He's very young. He's 20 right now. He's going to be 21 by the end of the season, but not till September. And already this year, he moved up from high A to double A. It's like his stats don't super matter. He was having a great year in high A, which is why they moved him up to double A. But like, it's fine. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that like at some point he will be in the majors and potentially be very good there.
Yeah, I think it's not a trend because it's just a hard thing to have a trend of. But I think what we're seeing right now with both Wood, De La Cruz, Aaron Judge, O'Neal Cruz, like all of these guys who are kind of packaged in more physically imposing bodies than you expect for a baseball player, we're seeing those guys move out of just pure first base DH status and into, oh no, these guys are, super athletic and can play real demanding positions with grace. And I'm looking forward to James Wood joining the major league club of that, which I can't imagine is like all that far off. I would be surprised if he's not up this time next year. So,
and I just wanted to shout him out because I do feel like that trend it felt like there was like between last year and this year, like a mini wave of that trend of people getting really excited about guys who are at the very high minors, like on the cusp, like especially Ellie De La Cruz and O'Neal Cruz and like those guys. And now we've got to look at all of those guys. I just wanted to shout out someone who's still coming. So James Wood, something for Nationals fans to potentially get excited about. That was Built Different, powered by Ram Trucks, built to serve. Do you want to do a game? Do we have time for a game?
Yes, I have a very quick game that is also somewhat inspired by Ellie De La Cruz. One of the things that is very interesting to me is when a player comes up and he's the first player of his birth year to debut in the majors. It is typically a sign of a very good career coming because it means you got to the majors very young. We just had the first player from 2003 join the majors, which makes me feel old. That was Yuri Perez, the Marlins pitcher, also very tall. Jordan Walker, the Cardinals prospect, was the first from 2002, but Ellie De La Cruz was the second. Wander Franco was the first from 2001. Now, I'm going to ask you 5 questions about the first player to debut in the majors from previous years. I made it multiple choice for a little bit of ease. So, the first player to make it to the majors born in 2000, was it Bobby Witt Jr., Julio Rodriguez, Elvis Luciano, or Luis Garcia, the Nationals one?
Were they all born in 2000, or is that the question?
Yes. All of the choices were actually born in the year of. Yeah.
The Nationals one, D?
Okay, so this was my trick question. Not even my trick question. This is baseball's trick question. The answer is Elvis Luciano, who was a relief pitcher for the Blue Jays, who got to the majors very fast and also left the majors very fast. As you will see, he is kind of the exception to the rule. Luis Garcia was the second one.
Okay.
Firstborn from 1999 to reach the majors. Was it Fernando Tatis Jr., Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Garrett Crochet, or Joe Adell?
Oh. I'm going to... Joe Adell?
No, it was Tatis. He was the first. He beat Vladimir Guerrero Jr. to the punch by about a month because he made the opening day roster and the Blue Jays brought up Guerrero a month in.
See, I thought that this one was also a trick question and it was going to be like Joe Adell had a brief stint before they sent him back down or something. All right, fine. I'm going to go over however on this quiz.
I don't think you are.
Okay.
Because here we go.
Let's go.
Firstborn from 1998. Bo Bichette, Leody Taveras, Juan Soto, or Sixto Sanchez?
Juan Soto?
It's Juan Soto.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
He beat everyone else by like a year and a half. I mean, it wasn't close. Yes, he was very young. Firstborn from 1997 to reach the majors. Victor Robles, Ozzie Albies, Kyle Tucker, or Ronald Acuna Jr.?
Ozzie Albies?
It was Ozzie Albies. Yeah, he was pretty notoriously young. I remember, I think I might have written about this when he came up. He was not as big a deal as Ronald Acuna Jr. as a prospect, but the combo of switch hitting and playing a good second base got him up very fast, and he succeeded more then than now. He's settled into a very nice player, but when he came up, he really hit with a bang. So he was the first from 1997. And now I jumped back to our shared birth year. The first player from 1990 to debut in the majors. Was it Nathan Eovaldi, Jose Altuve, Starlin Castro, or Brett Lawrie?
I'm trying to think how many years of service Jose Altuve has. Because that was that was going to be my natural inclination. I'm just going to go with it. Jose Altuve.
So it was close, but it was Starlin Castro. He came up as a very young shortstop / second baseman for the Cubs and accumulated just a lot more hits than you would have expected based on how long his career was. He hasn't been in the majors in a few years. So the answer is Starlin Castro, which is he's always a surprising one to look at the cumulative leaderboards and see that he's doing pretty well on those.
Oh.
So.
I definitely thought Jose Altuve was older than me. That's fine. All right. I feel like I thought I was going to go first, so I'm happy with my, what was it, 2 for 5?
Yeah, you're hitting like Luis Arraez. 400-ish.
Is that 400? Yeah.
Yes,
All right.
that's literally
That's
400.
literally 400. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
math.
And he's not even hitting 400 anymore. So take that,
No,
Luis Suarez.
so, yeah.
All right. Let's talk about ghosts. All right. And now for our main segment, we are joined by Michael Clair, writer at MLB.com, to talk about ghosts. That's not topical, especially, except for kind of. Zach, tell us why it's kind of topical.
Yes. Michael has a very specific beat, which is he is baseball media's foremost expert on poltergeists in the baseball world, ghosts as you know them. And this came to mind because when the Dodgers played in Milwaukee recently, there is a hotel that the visiting team often stays at called the Pfister Hotel. And it may or may not be haunted. There's enough rumors of its haunting that Mookie Betts decided to stay at an Airbnb instead. And I want to know what your official opinion on the Pfister Hotel is, and if Mookie Betts is the foremost practitioner of ghost avoidance in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, first, thank you so much for the kind words, but I got to give some credit. RJ Anderson's also out there, so there's a larger ghost baseball beat than people realize. You know, I've yet to encounter anything, and believe me, I've tried. I will specifically book hotels and go with my mother, the way like Vinny Pasquantino just did at the Pfister, and we will specifically like ask for the haunted room. And nothing ever happens. But I got to say, if your job as a baseball player, you got to be at your peak. I mean, look at NBA players. They're sleeping like 19 hours a day coming out of a cryogenic chamber to play basketball, and then they go back in. So sleep is paramount. If Mookie Betts doesn't want to be woken up by something in the middle of the night, doesn't want to be thinking about things knocking on the walls, I think he made the best choice possible. And just given the amount of players who are out there that have said they've experienced things, you know, he's probably making the right choice.
And specifically experience things while visiting Milwaukee as the visiting team. Take us through just like the origin of the ghost fear of the Pfister Hotel, and also like when we first started to know about this as a public.
Yeah, so the Pfister is one of those gorgeous old hotels that I think was remodeled a couple of years ago. It might be one half of it was remodeled and the other half is still like the old creepy part. So naturally, stories are going to kind of pop up in any old hotel. But this one seems to have, you know, a few extra. I remember hearing rumors of this haunted hotel before, you know, the internet was really a thing. So there's who knows how many stories are out there from retired guys that had stories in like, you know, 1993, but just they're in a local newspaper somewhere that never got digitized. But we've seen players from a ton of different teams. Some of my favorite are when it's not the player themselves sharing the story. Like Clint Hurdle once said, "I will not." When he was the manager of the Pirates, he was like, "I'm not afraid of ghosts, but I had a player come to my room multiple times saying that things were happening and he was too scared to sleep. So I just eventually said, why don't you just sleep in here with me?" I'm pretty sure that's how the story goes. I think like, yeah.
Okay, that's a heartwarming tale of a manager stepping up and doing
manager
what's
being
best.
dad.
Yeah.
That's my favorite genre of story is, team manager is just a dad. But this hotel, a lot of people think it's the old proprietor, or at least that's what the Pfister wants you to think. You know, it's the owner of the hotel welcoming you. But there's been a variety of types of stories, and they do sort of run the gamut from, you know, I heard knocking. Players have turned the radio off, gotten in the shower, the radio's back on when they get out. Giancarlo Stanton had his TV turn on and off. Bryce Harper said he put his clothes at the end of the bed, woke up, and they were on the floor. And I'm like, well, you just kicked in your sleep. But he also said a table had been moved from one side of the room to the other, and he actually thought somebody had been in the room with him. CJ Wilson shared a story where Colby Lewis experienced something that frightened him so much. The next day, he scheduled a meeting with the Rangers team chaplain. So there are a lot of, you know, some people say it's an old hotel, it's bad wiring. You hear knocks on the walls. But at the same time, Carlos Martinez literally went on Instagram 3-4 years, God, what is time? Maybe even more than 4 years ago at this point. and said, I just saw a ghost in my hotel room, so I'm in a teammate's hotel room now, and we're playing cards together and staying up all night because we've seen things.
This is
So
the Brewers' like secret weapon, is tiring out their opponents.
yes, and that's so. Remember when the Rays were going on their huge run at the start of the year? They have their own haunted hotel that teams often stay at, the Vinoy. Jared Saltalamacchia stayed there, shared a story during a broadcast of a ghostly woman that he saw, and he woke up and saw a boy and a man in a top hat standing over his bed.
This is
And
very specific.
yes, yeah, he like went into details there. And what, the Rays won their first like 13, 18, something, whatever, some insane number of home games to start the season. And I was thinking, it's the ghosts, man. I don't know how they did it, but they managed to like weaponize the ghosts in this hotel, get all the away teams to stay there. I talked last year with the Red Sox traveling secretary, and he said, yeah, we stay there. He laughed a little. He's like, I haven't experienced anything, but we have had players arrange their own accommodations when we're in town. So at the very least, players believe, and they've had enough experiences that they go all in.
I was just gonna say, we saw recently Brent Rooker tweet about the Milwaukee hotel, and maybe that's what's wrong with the A's, but not lately. So
yeah, they're winning now. They did great in Milwaukee. Yeah,
the ghost
maybe the A's needed
side.
some ghosts to bring them back to life. Yeah. I don't know how that works.
Maybe the ghosts like inspired them to do like a seance, and the seance fixed some other stuff while it was at it. All right, give us some non-Pfister hotel related ghost anecdotes, because if you think it's just that, it's not.
So there's the Vinoy, but then one of them that is my favorite is the Lackawanna Hotel. I believe this is in Scranton, Pennsylvania. So this isn't even a major league story. This is a hotel that minor league teams will stay at. And David Price and Wade Davis, this story is from years and years ago. I believe this was, back on the Rays, but Wade Davis said, quote, we started hearing knocking on the door, but no one was ever there. We tried to get to sleep, but it got really hot in the room. We turned the air conditioner to cool, and it would go back to hot. That doesn't sound like a ghost. That sounds like a bad air conditioner, but turn it down as cold as it would get, and it would turn up. Then we started hearing some weird noises, stuff out of the walls, can't describe them, kind of like screams. And Wade Davis said that they were so scared they were up and waiting for the bus by 7:30 the next morning, and he said that's how serious it was. We're never up at 7:30 after a game.
I feel like I should ask, what do either of you? What is your ghost tolerance level for believing? That was.
I mean, I have personally never believed in a ghost or had anything I felt I needed to tolerate. But I do know there are some players who also, I think, perhaps like you, Michael, pursue ghosts. You mentioned Vinny Pasquantino. I think John Gray is also a ghost hunter.
Yeah, so John Gray, I interviewed him years and years ago. He said he was 10 years old and he saw something in his bedroom at night. He wouldn't tell me what it was. He said, it's a personal thing. I don't really want to share that. To me, I'm like, that's scarier. Like, if you tell us, oh, I saw, a headless woman, that's one thing. But now I'm imagining anything possible. But no, he's a full-on ghost hunter. He travels with this is at least a couple of years ago. I don't know if, he's still doing it, but he travels with like a K2 meter, and an EMF, electromagnetic field reader. Like basically anything you see on the ghost hunting shows, John Gray is doing that. He's done, a ghost hunt at the Pfister. He said it, he came away with nothing. But no, he like legitimately he's out there. He's using his major league travels to like try and reach the other side, which is a perfect combination of like I want a book series about that, like a middle grade young adult book series, the major league pitcher / like ghost investigator at night. Yeah.
Finding nothing at the Pfister Hotel is actually the most sort of credible thing that he could have done, because now I really believe that he's not making this up. You know what I mean? Like if he's like, no, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to go back. Have you ever seen a ghost, Michael?
I have never seen a ghost. I've never felt a ghost. I want to believe so bad. Well, it's daylight. It's daylight right now, right? I want to believe so
Now
bad.
you want to believe.
Yeah. I wake up, at 2 a.m. to some sound I haven't heard, and my first thought is someone breaking in, or is it a car outside? It's, have the dead return to walk amongst the living. And maybe at that time I'm like, no, they're definitely not real. So Hannah, how about you? Have you ever experienced
I have never experienced a ghost. I think if you don't want to experience ghosts, you should get cats, because then you just chuck everything up to cats when you hear them in the night. I will say when I was first dating my now husband, one of the first nights, he hates when I tell this story, by the way, because he doesn't I don't think he believes in ghosts, but one of the first nights that I stayed over, he woke up in the middle of the night, it's like, it's hard. And I was like, what is it? And he said, oh, nothing, just a little girl ghost. And then he went right back to sleep.
And Hannah never slept again.
I tell him about this. I remind him about this all the time.
So my wife did something similar. She woke up in the middle of the night.
There's our
did you
ghost.
see the ghost?
That's the bandwagon
this
ghost.
Is the bandwagon ghost. It turns up all the time.
Okay, so for people who are listening to this in audio form, Hannah has a sign behind her for our video version that says the bandwagon. And it has a mind of its own where it turns itself up so bright you cannot see it anymore. And it just did it while we were discussing ghosts. So
it did
the bandwagon ghost.
It did a bunch like 2 weeks ago or something. And then while we were waiting for Michael to join us on this Zoom, it did it. And I thought, oh, look at that. It's celebrating the ghost episode. And then it just did it again. Make this make this a social clip so people believe us.
Yeah. Mookie Betts is never going to Brooklyn.
Check out this social clip, Mookie Betts.
I love that. Yeah. This ghost is just like, it's been waiting for you to do an episode on ghosts to finally announce its presence. And we're just like, nope, definitely not. So,
all right, sorry. Your experience with ghosts.
Oh, no. I mean, this is just very similar to your husband's. It's my wife. I woke up in the middle of the night. She was standing, half sleepwalking. So, shoulders hunched, in the doorway, our bedroom hallway. She's in the doorway. And I'm like, hello? Or what? Are you okay? And she goes, I just saw a man run by carrying a bag dripping red. And I'm just like, what?
All right, her ghost was way scarier. Jake just saw a little girl ghost, so
I think the little girl ghost might be scarier, honestly, because that's the something bad has happened here.
Little girl ghosts are notoriously bad signs.
The worst is she goes straight back to bed, and I'm awake all night long. What is the deal with that?
Yeah, that's why Jake moved into my apartment very quickly when we were dating, and possibly it was because we were at his apartment when he saw the little girl ghost. So I think our entire relationship is just because of that haunted apartment.
Oh my God. Well, that does remind me, one of my favorite baseball ghost stories is actually not a player who experienced something. This is one I had to use the Wayback Archive when I was trying to find it to refresh myself. There was a woman, her name was, I'm looking at my notes, Samantha Tengelich from Traverse City, Michigan. She moved into a house with her husband and child in Traverse City. And she said, I knew nothing about baseball before this. I was coming up the stairs, and there was this man with baggy pants, horizontally striped socks, and a baseball cap that looked very old-fashioned with a shorter brim than they have today. And I guess they did a seance and everything because they discovered that this was minor league ball player Edward Matt, who played in Traverse City, told them, why he was released because he fell in the town of Fremont or Free Soil, which is on the train line from Michigan to Chicago when he's on his way to report for the White Sox. And the best part is Samantha says she wasn't a baseball fan before this and then started watching baseball because she was contacted by the spirit of Edward Matt. So
wait, did he never got to debut? Is that? I mean, if ghosts are like a manifestation of unfinished business, you'd think there would be more minor league player ghosts.
I was going to say, minor league baseball players seem like a rich vein for ghost stories. Those are some haunted careers.
Some cursed residences, too.
Yeah, Ed Matt never made the majors, never made the major leagues. So.
Well, getting his due here.
Yeah.
That would have been a great addition to the 2 first name baseball player lore that has some, Connor, Joe, Jason, Adam. We got some real 2 first namers right now. Ed Matt would be a good addition.
A very, very good addition.
He thinks so too. I don't have a good way of wrapping up a segment on ghosts other than to be like, you know what? If you are a player from like 1993 and for some reason you're listening to this podcast and you want to tell someone about ghosts, consider this service journalism. And Michael Clair, how can they reach you? These baseball players who want to tell you their ghost stories.
I'm on Twitter and waiting for that Blue Sky invite, I guess. But on Twitter, I'm at Michael S. Clair, and please, any ball players with spooky old baseball stories, or anyone out there who discovered a old minor league baseball player still angry at the GM who never called him up, and so is now haunting some suburban home somewhere. That's the story that's going to change this season, I tell you. So that's what we should be talking about in October, not the playoffs.
I'm surprised that we got the minor league CBA without there being like a ghost uprising of minor leaguers. I feel like that was the next step. If the sort of like media onslaught didn't work, they were going to go with ghosts.
Yeah,
ghosts hire a necromancer.
Lost years of their life from sleeping on cots and eating
Exactly.
McDonald's,
Thank you
so much for joining us, Michael.
Oh my God, thank you for having me. Anytime there's a baseball ghost story, I will flood your DMs and demand that the truth be printed and shared with the public.
Okay, now continuing with the, I guess that's spooky isn't quite right, but the the something fishy's going on here theme. This week I'm bandwagoning the Oakland A's. The A's have won. The A's currently have the longest winning streak ongoing in baseball. I think that's still true.
Would you say they're coming back from the dead?
I would. Wow, that was a better transition than mine. They're coming back from the near dead. It's like a Monty Python I'm not dead yet situation. The A's have won 6 straight. This is we'll discuss if this is well-timed or poorly timed, but it is such timed that currently the owners' meetings are ongoing in New York, which I assume will at least touch on the way that John Fisher is handling his baseball team that he owns. But more encouragingly, or at least more, excitingly, they've won 6 straight heading into tonight, Tuesday night, when they're doing their reverse boycott. This has been something that's been in the works for a while by like a fan group in Oakland, rooted in Oakland. And this predates the this year news of the A's maybe moving to Vegas, but also maybe not. Like it's in response to the many years of seemingly moving in that direction, but predating the sort of what this latest wave of news about that. This team in Oakland, or this group in Oakland, organized to have what they're calling a reverse boycott. It's intentionally on like a Tuesday night, inconvenient, not a big going to a baseball game kind of day. Also intentionally against the Rays, a team that doesn't draw, but now is also against the best team in baseball. We'll get to that. And the point is to show that there are fans in Oakland. So this is actually a very complicated issue, which is like, what do you do if you're a fan of a team that's really bad and you want to express your displeasure? Well, maybe you don't go to the game because, vote with your dollar. But then by not going to the game, it's bolstering John Fisher's case that they shouldn't be in Oakland, move it to somewhere else. There's no fans here. And so for at least one night, the fans of Oakland are like, we're going to turn out, we're going to show that we would like to support a team. And I am genuinely thrilled for them that it has the potential to be at least a little bit celebratory and not just like a kind of like weird last gasp effort amidst both an unlikely reversal of the team leaving and also an opportunity to watch very bad baseball. I mean, it still could be. Look at it. It's still, they're still not a good baseball team, and they are still facing the best baseball team, the Tampa Bay Rays. But hey, they beat them yesterday. They did. Tampa Bay Rays.
They're coming off of this quick little win streak that, for most teams, 6 games is good. But for the A's, it's incredible. I mean, this is showing signs of life. They're only like a game back of the Royals. They might not even be the worst team in baseball record-wise pretty soon. So I think it's just when the fans show up for this game tonight, they're going to have a team that's playing well right now, that is getting, they have 2-3 pretty good hitters. The pitching staff's still terrible, but they're kind of hitting, and just the optimism that comes with that is going to be exciting to see when the fans show up.
The Oakland A's record in March and April this year, 6-23. The Oakland A's record in May was 6-23. The Oakland A's record over the last 6 games, 6-0. So that's pretty cool. They're 18-50. So, you know, they're still 18-50, but they are no longer on pace to finish with the worst record in the modern era. They are going to finish with one less loss than the 1962 Mets if they continue on at this pace. That actually is something. Like, I think it was interesting when they were like maybe on pace to set history in a bad way, but I didn't want this game in particular, this Revoice Burkett game, to be depressing, and now it won't be. And just like, I'm bandwagoning them from the sheer like most basic definition of bandwagoning, which is that like for the first and possibly last time all season, I will make a point to definitely tune in to the game tonight. And that is largely to see how many people are wearing shirts, carrying signs, imploring John Fisher to sell the team, but also to see if they can, you know, take 2 of 3. I assume they're facing the Rays 3 times. Take 2 of 3 from the Rays. And also maybe the only time I'm like, you know, me, I love the Rays. I'm enjoying their run of unmitigated dominance, but I hope it is slightly mitigated in Oakland. So bandwagon the A's for one night.
Bandwagon the A's.
I mean, or for the rest of the season. I mean, look, if the A's are not good, but like not the worst team in baseball this year, that would also be cool. I mean, not for whoever is the worst team in baseball. That would be really bleak.
Very bad.
That'd be bleak. Don't let the A's be better than you. Speaking directly to the Kansas City Royals. Okay, that's everything we have time for this week. Because you and I both have to run. I have to run to the owners' meetings, the commissioner's office, Midtown Manhattan, to see what they've all been talking about. And you are going to the Subway Series. See the flailing Mets face the not flailing, but Aaron Judge-less Yankees in a series that you are calling the
Suboptimal Subway Series.
Ah, exactly. But thank you to Michael for joining us. Follow him on Twitter at Michael S. Clair. You can follow me at Hannah R. Crizer. You can follow Zach at ZR Crizer. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Ram Trucks. And if you've made it this far, you should definitely subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel where you can see the haunted bandwagon sign. Leave us a 5-star review, tell a friend, and we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.